name is Galen MacLusky. I'm one of the EDI students here. And for my thesis, I focused on designing accessible testing for sexually transmitted infections. Something that really inspires me as a designer is designing for underserved communities. And what I found is that STIs are a silent epidemic because they're incredibly common, but also invisible. So I realized that this was an underserved problem in my own community. And throughout the course of my project, I moved from the broad question of how to reduce the rates of STIs on campus to a pretty narrow solution, which is an in-bathroom dispenser for STI tests. And I'm really excited about where I landed, but I want to invite you to talk with me about that afterwards. Because what I'm going to discuss here is what I learned about the design process in moving from A to B to A. It allowed me to really re-examine some pretty traditional philosophies about design. Some rules like encourage wild ideas and know who you're designing for and not being afraid to fail. These are pretty simple ideas, but in going through this process, I learned that there's a lot more complexity to them. And early on in the process, you hear this a lot. Encourage wild ideas. It's important to us because if we self-filter, we can't be creative and we can't come up with truly innovative ideas. But I've also noticed that as designers, we're often moving between divergent and convergent modes of thinking. And so we generate a ton of wild ideas in that divergent mode, and we lose them all when we converge and try to make something practical. And I had an interesting experience with the wild idea. When I was looking at different ways we could reduce STIs on campus, I thought about testing. And this wild idea is, what if we could put a test strip in urinals or in toilets on campus, so that when you urinate on it, you find out right away, yes or no, do you have an STI? It's a great idea, but it's completely unfeasible. Technology doesn't exist there. But I realized that there's a core part of that idea that's actually really strong. The idea there is let's get tested while we're doing something that we already would be doing. And building off of that core concept, we could look at maybe we're going to offer students drug testing services so they can find out if they're going to pass a drug test when they actually go to work for a company and at the same time test them for STIs. Or what if we promoted blood donation on campus? Because the more people who are donating blood, the more opportunities we have to test people for blood-borne STIs. Or what if we took this idea and scaled it down, kept it in the bathroom, but made it more a urine test dispenser? And this eventual idea became the backbone of my thesis work. And I realized that if I hadn't started with that wild idea, and if I hadn't looked for that nugget, I wouldn't have gotten to where I did. So I want to refine this a little bit. I think wild ideas are incredibly important, but I think we should also look for ways to refine them. Let's find out what the kernel of truth is and build on that, and that's how we can really create innovative ideas. But ideas aren't enough. People tell you a lot that you need to know who you're designing for. And I thought I had a pretty good handle on this. So early on, this was my idea. We're going to design for Northwestern students. And the problem is that students who are asymptomatic aren't finding out that they have an STI, and they're continuing to spread it. So we need to find a way to get more students tested so that they know they can change their behavior. The problem is, when I took this out to people, I always found a group of people that was excluded by any sort of solution. So in that drug testing tie-in that I spoke about, there were some students who were really excited about the prospect of being able to find out if they were going to pass a drug test or not. But there were lots of students who were completely excluded by that idea. If they didn't care about their drug status, they weren't going to do it. And blood donation as well excluded key parts of the population, like men who have sex with men, who simply can't donate blood. And a bathroom dispenser that I was really excited about also excluded people who didn't actually want to go get tested. So I got stuck. And I got stuck for a long, long time, coming up with ideas and not making any headway. And in my frustration, I did this. And what this is a summary of all the themes I saw in my interviews and all the people I spoke to. I'm going to focus in on a little area here. This scale shows all the people I spoke to and whether they had no experience on the far left with getting tested, or if they got tested frequently. This person on the far right, that blue sticker, is almost a monthly test. And when I looked at all this information on that page, I realized that there was a group of people who had no experience in testing, but was also very interested in getting tested. And that prompted a much stronger focus around what my real problem was. There's a group of Northwestern students who are thinking about but not acting on testing. I realized that they're doing this because they have no symptoms. They're not willing to overcome the effort barriers it takes to get tested. So what we need to do to address their needs is to bring testing to them and make testing effortless. So I think it's not enough to just know who you're designing for. I think you need to know a specific persona or a specific group of people that you're designing for and what their specific needs are. I had approached this in a too vague a way, and when I narrowed down, I actually freed myself to create an impactful solution. I think as designers, we often want to solve everyone's problems, and I wanted to solve it for everyone on campus, but I wasn't being effective when I was doing it. Moving forward a little bit, as I push this concept of an in-bathroom test dispenser, I realized that it gets harder and harder to do this. Early on, it's very easy to not be afraid to fail, because you're not committed to an idea, and if you do fail, you've got tons of time left. 3 weeks before your presentation feels like a harder time to fail. And that's where I found myself. Because I had an idea for a dispenser that I wanted to put in context and see how people responded. But I was afraid. I was afraid that I wouldn't get people to talk to me, and I was afraid that I'd find out that this was a terrible idea and I shouldn't do it. And I put it off doing this test. I waited weeks. And when I finally did it, here on campus in University Hall, I picked a location I thought would be perfect. It's a single occupancy bathroom. It's well trafficked. So not only is it private, but there were tons of people going in and out. And I sat outside and I waited to talk to people. And no one wanted to talk to me. People said a lot of things like this. I think it's pretty interesting. People were seeing it at least. But everyone had something they needed to do. Everyone had something else they were thinking about. And I moved locations and still had the same problem. And I thought I'd failed because I hadn't gotten people to talk to me. And I was now worried that this really wasn't a compelling idea. When I thought about what I'd seen that day, I saw students come out of a class, go to the bathroom, and go back into the classroom. Or come out of a class and rush off to the library to go study. And I realized that the context I thought this should exist in was completely wrong. Because on campus, students are in student mode. They're thinking about what they need to do. And they're not thinking about anything else. They're not thinking about personal health or STIs. So I failed. I failed in this test, but I learned something completely unexpected that really shifted my own direction in the project. So I think it's easy to say don't be afraid to fail. Let's accept that we are afraid to fail, but also realize that failure is informative and doing nothing is not. That's what gets me through it. And by failing, I landed on a design that I'm really excited about and would love to talk to you afterwards. Testing that students can do in private, in a bathroom, on their own terms. So I want to take the time to thank all the people who helped make that learning possible, especially the James Dyson Foundation for their funding, and my mentor, Travis Lee, for his support in this project. Thank you.